This is Boomer Time, a proactive podcast for baby boomers, about baby boomers, and for people taking care of baby boomers. If that sounds like you, then you're in the right place. I'm Nancy Kogar, elder law attorney and aging advocate, and this podcast was made just for you. Remember, though, the things we discuss here are not intended to be legal advice, and no attorney-client relationship is established by this podcast. Howdy, folks, and welcome to Boomer Time. I'm your host, Nancy Kogar, and I am an elder law and estate planning attorney here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and your number one aging advocate, as I like to say. I am just passionate about helping people become more aware of the legal tools they need as they age, and I want to help you put those in place. And as you know, this show is aimed at helping all of us become better prepared for all those issues that come with aging. That's a big part of this planning, and it's a big part of my practice. I've shared it before that sometimes I see disputes as part of estate administration, and they're just growing all the time. Those disputes are started because either someone is not following the directions of the individual that made the will or trust, or maybe someone else just doesn't like the way it's being handled. There may be another issue related to assets that go missing, or that one person thought that they should get it, but the actual will doesn't provide for that. Whatever it is, there can be hard feelings. Sometimes, those implode into full-out litigation over an estate or challenging a will or even a trust. We lawyers have seen an increase in those cases too. Now, I do my best to try to devise estate plans for my clients that will work to avoid those kind of disputes or lawsuits from coming up in the future. That's the intentional and personalized estate planning that I do. I do say that if you take shortcuts or you just try to do it yourself, sometimes that's just going to lead to disputes. I recently finished a will contest that was extremely contested. There was no settlement between the two family members involved. And you know what? It went on for 6 years after the individual who passed away died, and focused on tracts of land that this individual left behind. Some family members thought it should be split one way, and the others thought it should be split another way. Guess what? It all led to a full-blown will contest and jury trial. So that's leading me to what I want to talk about today. Testators or will makers have a right to dispose of their property however they like. Of course, they need to do it through a legally enforceable document, a last will and testament that complies with the state requirements. You also need to factor in things like capacity, undue influence, and even duress, because these kinds of issues can raise questions as to whether the individual making the will was of sound mind when he or she made it. Or maybe someone was pressuring him or her to dispose of their assets a particular way, or even threatening them to do it that way. Again, that can lead to lawsuits and will contests, and if any of those claims are proven, then it can result in the will being set aside and invalidated so that it has no effect. You don't want that either. So these are real circumstances that I'm talking about today, and things that we deal with all the time. The bottom line is, which I hope will sink in a bit after I share this, because this is really troubling. Did you know that most cases involving an older individual or vulnerable senior being subject to undue influence, duress, or even abuse, financial, physical, or mental abuse, those things are not committed by strangers. More often than not, they're committed by their own family members. It's called elder abuse, and it's defined as an intentional act or failure to act that causes or creates a risk of harm to an older adult, age 60 or older. So Nearly half, 47% of all calls reporting elder abuse involve family members as the perpetrators. And that's according to the National Center on Elder Abuse. So the majority of elder abuse is committed by family members, and in particular, adult children of older adults. Other common culprits are people in positions of trust, trustees, or powers of attorney, agents under powers of attorney, and caregivers. People who have responsibility to care for these individuals and are using it for the wrong reason. This is significant, and we're going to talk about it today. Indications are, too, that these cases are increasing. As many as 1 in 5 senior adults have experienced some form of elder abuse. And only 1 in 24 cases are even reported. So how would you know how to recognize elder abuse? Do you know what to do if you see it? Would you do anything? Would you ignore it? What if the victim is you, and you are a victim of some form of exploitation or abuse? How are you going to protect yourself? Well, I hope to share some of that with you today. And we're going to talk about the prevalence, who's at risk, and I'm even going to share some real-life stories with you today. I'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. It's Nancy Kogar. This is Boomer Time. I'm an elder law and estate planning attorney here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I have this show because I want you to be better prepared and aware of the things that you need to know about as you age. Want to find out how you can sit down with me and talk about putting a plan together? Go to nancykogar.com and you can reach me there and we can talk about it. Put something personalized and comprehensive in place for you. I'd love to do it. So we're talking about elder abuse today. It is very prevalent. In addition to increasing each year, 1 in 10 older adults will experience some form of elder abuse. And you know what? Many endure multiple types simultaneously. And we're going to talk about what constitutes elder abuse in just a minute. So over 5% of seniors have become the victim of financial fraud or exploitation each year. And we've talked about scams, but we're talking even broader than that today. So in the last 20 years, the rate of non-fatal physical assaults involving seniors has increased 75% for men and over 35% for women. Nearly 5% of all seniors are subject to some kind of psychological or emotional abuse in any given year. This is not good. Emotional neglect from family members is the most common form of elder abuse. 27%. Emotional neglect. So as I said before, there's a prevalence of having family members being the ones committing these crimes because they are crimes. 60% of elder abusers are family members, most often spouses or, as I said, adult children. 64% of long-term care staff report committing abuse to some degree in the past year. Can you believe that? And nearly 42% of seniors with dementia experience emotional abuse from their caregivers. It's a tough job. It's very challenging, but if you're in the position of a caregiver, you need to know how to deal with these issues in the right way. And you're not alone. That's part of the reason I developed this podcast, so we could talk about these types of things. And there is help available. And you're not alone, but you need to approach these things the right way. 90%. this is what makes this so complex. 90% of elder abuse occurs in the victim's house. So if they're at home and it's occurring, it's very difficult to find out unless it gets reported or someone sees it. And I've used this number before when it came to my scams episodes, but seniors who suffer financial abuse collectively lose about, I say with scams, my number was $3 billion a year. That was from the FBI, but here it's $2.6 billion every year. So this is a big problem affecting a lot of people, and it's an expensive problem. So what constitutes abuse? Well, there's financial abuse, which can be illegal, unauthorized, or improper use of an older individual's resources for the other's personal gain or benefit. That could be with a power of attorney. It could be money, turning money over and depriving the older adult for the benefit of using those monies. Maybe they're taking their Social Security check. Well, maybe it's taking a credit card and using it without grandma's knowledge or consent. I've seen this one. I've seen it, where a granddaughter accumulated about $50,000 in unauthorized charges on her Meemaw's credit card. Maybe sometimes the grandmother might give the card and they have a cognitive decline, but that doesn't give you a free ride to just charge it all up. You're taking advantage of an individual. Maybe the individual who's taking the card is coercing another older individual. Maybe they want them to sign a document like a will or a contract, or even deceive them about the same kind of document in order to get a signature on it. These are all the wrong motives. All the wrong motives. Sometimes people will file a conservatorship to gain access to people's assets. That kind of court action is meant to protect a disabled individual and not to gain access to their assets for someone else's benefit. So that's financial abuse. Physical abuse, obviously, is the intentional or reckless use of physical harm or coercion that could result in bodily injury, physical pain, or impairment. This can be hitting, beating, pushing, shaking, unlawful, excessive, or unnecessary use of force, and even includes force feeding, hitting, beating, as I've said. Sexual abuse, unfortunately, unwanted touching, sexual assault, or battery, can even be sexual harassment. Any kind of sexual interaction with an elderly person who lacks capacity to give consent. That's so wrong. And non-consensual sexual contact of any kind with an older adult. Emotional or psychological abuse, verbal assaults, insults, threatening an older individual, intimidation, humiliation, isolation, even harassment, that all constitutes elder abuse. And unfortunately, we see outright abandonment, desertion, plain old desertion of an older individual by someone who assumed responsibility or control for that adult. Each state has laws aimed at protecting older adults and prosecuting individuals who commit an act that's found to constitute elder abuse. Each agency here in Tennessee has their own definition of abuse, which is outlined in the statutes or the state laws. In Tennessee, elder abuse is a Class E felony. That means if you're convicted, it's punishable by up to 15 years in prison. Get this, failure to report can be a misdemeanor. And there are also civil actions which can lead to compensatory damages for abuse, neglect, and even exploitation. And in 2017, Tennessee passed the Elderly Vulnerable Adult Financial Exploitation Act. That's a mouthful, but it seeks to protect individuals over 65. There's also an abuse registry, just like the predator registry. There's an abuse registry, which puts people who have been convicted on that registry and lists them. people who have abused, neglected, exploited, or even stolen property from an older adult. You might want to look at that if you're thinking about, an assisted living facility, something like that. Just precaution, precaution, precaution. So how do you recognize it? How do you protect yourself from becoming a victim? And what do you do if you think you're being exploited or abused? We're going to talk about that next. So stay with me. And like I said, I have some real life stories involving the abuse and neglect of seniors. And you're going to want to hear some of these things. I'll be right back. Hi, it's Nancy. I'm back. And, I just want to say, this may be obvious, but it's important to say nonetheless. If an older adult is in an immediate, life-threatening danger, call 911. And if anyone suspects someone may be mistreated, they should call Adult Protective Services or even Tennessee's long-term care ombudsman or the police. And I'm going to have these numbers on my website, nancykogar.com, so that you can access these and maybe print them out, copy them, put them somewhere. This is important information. And I also wanted to mention that, putting the right people in place that you trust and putting your plans together for your assets is also a very productive way of avoiding some of these things happening down the road. So I can help you with that. I can help you, and you can reach me at nancykogar.com, and we can talk about getting a plan in place for you that's personal, comprehensive, and addresses not only your concerns, but helps you to have the right people on your side when you need them. So we're talking real life stories as far as elder abuse. And, I like to do a lot of research when I put together these podcasts because I want to make sure what I'm telling you is timely and comprehensive and going to the right sources as far as the information that we're looking for. Well, the Department of Justice actually has a really great website when it comes to offering resources and insight, awareness, facts, and so forth. And I'm going to put that on my website as well. So you might want to check that out. It's really got some interesting things on it. I think you would learn something. And that's where I got these stories. So I want to go through these. I tried to touch on different kinds of issues here because as you heard, there's financial exploitation, there's physical harm, there's emotional abuse, psychological abuse, isolation, and abandonment. Sometimes it's a combination of all those things. But it's a problem. So the first story involves an 87-year-old woman, Juliet. She lived with her daughter, Nanette. That happens a lot. I see, families that come in and mom has moved into the house. She was there for 3 years. Nanette helped her mom with daily activities like getting her meals, bathing, cleaning the house. Then, at one point, Nanette decided to move in with her new boyfriend, and he lived in the adjoining state. So guess what? Mom got left at home alone. So about a week later, Juliet's niece came into town and happened to stop by to visit her aunt. Well, she saw that the inside of the house was in very bad condition. Juliet was in poor health. She hadn't eaten. Her medicines were all out of whack. She wasn't clean. She was wearing dirty clothes. Guess what happened? Juliet's niece called Adult Protective Services and the State Area Agency on Aging and this was prosecuted as abuse of an elder adult. Clarence, he was 79 years old, and he was invited, or rather, he invited his 2 adult sons to move in with him so he wouldn't be alone after his wife died. I've heard of that scenario before. Well, the sons took him up on it, but they got kind of irritated with Dad after a while. Of course, he was 79 years old, cramping their style. So believe it or not, the sons soon sent their father out to live in the shed in the backyard, and they locked him out of his own house. Sometimes they'd put food out for him. Once in a while, they gave him a basin of cold water and a washcloth so he could clean himself up. All this happening in the backyard. Well, one of Clarence's neighbors finally noticed that Clarence seemed to be living in the shed. Just something didn't make sense. And she called Adult Protective Services anonymously. She didn't have to give her name. She reported what she had seen. And they did a welfare check, and this was prosecuted as abuse and neglect. Henrietta, 88 years old, required a court-appointed guardian due to a combination of physical and mental disabilities that left her partially incapacitated. Her niece, Roberta, was appointed as her guardian, or conservator, as we would call it here. Roberta visited Henrietta in her home a few times, but after that, this is a court-appointed conservator. After that, she never came back and didn't make any other arrangements for her aunt's care. A neighbor noticed the lack of activity over at Henrietta's house, knocked on the door, and couldn't get Henrietta to answer the door. So she called law enforcement. And the rest was prosecuted as neglect and abuse of a senior. Boy. Here's a lady that lived in a nursing home that was known for good residential care. She was 77, so she was younger. Her name was Margaret. Well, one day a nursing aide noticed that Margaret appeared very nervous and anxious, but she wouldn't explain why. So while she was preparing for a bath, the nursing aide noticed multiple bruises on Margaret's arms, neck, and back and asked, "What happened?" Initially, Margaret didn't say anything. But subsequently, the director of nursing learned from another resident that a new aide there at the nursing home had sexually assaulted Margaret. As required by law, the director of nursing reported it as sexual assault to Adult Protective Services. They initiated an investigation which involved the ombudsman and local law enforcement. Catherine, 82, raised 2 grandsons. You know, we see grandmothers raising grandchildren all the time, right? She was raising her 82-year-old grandmother, raising her 2 grandsons, Joel and Kent, okay? They had physically abused her when they were teenagers. They went off and did their thing, and then after 12 years in prison, Joel came back, unfortunately, because he had nowhere to go. So he came home one night, and he'd been down at the billiards club drinking it up, and he was drunk. He banged on the door, insisting that his grandmother let him in, but she told him to go away. I don't blame her. After he entered the house through a back window, Joel beat his grandmother. Somehow, Catherine made it to a neighbor's house and called 911. Joel was arrested, and Catherine was taken to the hospital. Here's one more for you. Zoe, 79, was healthy, independent, and lived with her unmarried daughter, Trish. They shared expenses, lived together. I hear that all the time, too. Zoe believed that she had a good relationship with her daughter. Nevertheless, Trish sometimes yelled at her mother, Sometimes she lost her temper and called her horrible names, telling her she was worthless. Trish then began to threaten to put her mother in a nursing home. Zoe tried to ignore these rants because she was grateful to live with her daughter, and she was in a home that was safe and secure, but she also thought, of course, that she didn't deserve to be treated that way and face those kind of comments. Zoe eventually told a close friend that her daughter was yelling at her and making threats. And the friend suggested that Trish and Zoe seek counseling and that Trish get some help from the local area on aging. So that helped resolve that issue. So this is serious, obviously. And, the more isolated people are, which there's a lot of older people that are isolated, the more likely they are to be abused. So what can you do if you suspect abuse? Well, as a family or friend of the victim, you can file a vulnerable adult order of protection on behalf of a victim. That only requires that you be related to the victim, that, the victim be 18 years or older, and that the victim lacks the capacity to file it herself or himself. You can also petition for conservatorship and report it to Adult Protective Services or Tennessee's long-term care ombudsman, or you can call the police. Anyone can personally help by just spending more time with a senior to prevent isolation and provide some social connection, maybe provide some transportation. Get to know the person. Paying attention always helps to prevent or lessen risks. And you may be making a big difference in that person's life. So if you are a victim of abuse, I will tell you right now that you have the right to file a police report and get help. You can also seek a civil remedy in court if you want, but to press criminal charges, all you have to do is fill out a police report and tell them what happened. There's help. And like I said, I'm going to have some of that help on my website, so you can see those resources and look at that online at nancykogar.com. And like I said before, if there's an emergency, call 911. So there are some things you can do to build protections and even some oversight into your estate planning documents, including, fiduciary protector positions. I do this all the time. If someone is older and they have some things in place, but they want some accountability or oversight or something to offer some additional assistance, we can build those things into your estate plan. So, there are options available. So I would say, if that sounds like something that you want to find out more about, go to my website, nancykogar.com, call, schedule something, get prepared. That's the best way to stay safe and in place and avoid things in the future. So like I said, this has been a really serious topic that we've talked about today, but a necessary one. And I hope this has helped you. Maybe you're thinking about somebody that that, I raised some red flags about some of the things that we talked about. You are supposed to report these things. Actually, I, as a lawyer, have a mandatory responsibility to report these. And like I said, if you don't report things, sometimes that can cause you to be facing some charges, misdemeanor, so forth. And it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. So I appreciate you listening to me today. And I just wanted to mention a couple things before we end our time together. I always have my elder law news available for you, and we hand select those articles. That's news that you probably don't see on a lot of the local television or even in the newspaper. It's all about aging, issues related to aging that I think you need to know about. So it's free. If you want to subscribe, go to my website, nancykogar.com, and just tell me you want to get on the newsletter list. We got a lot of people on there. So you are welcome to join us. And we have the podcast, of course, and our numbers are growing. I really appreciate all of you listening and sharing with friends. I've heard from some of you that you are sharing, and I really appreciate that. And I know I've got friends out there too, so just keep listening, and I appreciate you being there. It's good to know that you're out there. And let me know too if there's a topic or a question that you have. Reach out to us. It may make a good future episode, or something like that. I want to know. And I'd like to know what you think of the show, all as generally. Is there something you want to hear more of? Is there something you don't want to hear? Is there some information that's missing that I'm not giving you? Just let me know. I'm doing this to be helpful to you. So, and with that, I appreciate you listening today. These are important topics, like I said, and I want to create community here. And I am trying to be encouraging because, like I said, the worst time can be when you're isolated and you just think there's nobody there for you. So we are here for you, and we are going to keep talking about these issues. Okay? I'm your aging advocate. Don't forget that. So I will see you next time. In the meantime, stay well. Okay? And watch out for each other.